The first time people saw Leander lose control, they said it looked like a massacre without a weapon. In a sealed underground conference room, 10 high-ranking alpha captains dropped to their knees at the same time, choking on something they couldn't fight. 2 Omegas collapsed on the floor, their bodies reacting violently, heat triggered against their will. No one dared to move. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Because at the center of that room stood Leander, the Mafia boss, an enigma whose pheromones didn't just dominate, they crushed. And then the door opened, and I walked in. My name is Nixon. I'm a beta. No scent, no pheromone, no presence worth noticing in a crowd. The kind of person people forget the moment they look away. I stepped over broken glass, ignored the men gasping on the floor, and placed a file on the table in front of him. Boss, the shipment routes need your confirmation. The entire room went dead silent. Leander slowly turned his head toward me, eyes bloodshot, veins tight along his neck like something was about to snap. For a second, I thought I miscalculated, that I would die right there. Then he exhaled. Just one breath. And the pressure in the room dropped. Not gone, just weaker. Enough for people to breathe again. That was 5 years ago. That was the moment I stopped being an intern and became something else entirely. Now, I stand right behind him every single day, in rooms filled with killers, liars, and men who would shoot first and ask questions later. Officially, I'm his right hand. The one who handles schedules, negotiations, logistics. Unofficially, I'm the leash on a monster no one else can control. The rumors say Leander hates betas. Says we're useless, slow, a flaw in evolution. And maybe that's true for everyone else. But not for me. Because every single night, that same terrifying enigma has to drag me into his arms just to fall asleep. Secretary Nixon is pitiful. I've heard them say more than once. Working under that lunatic boss. I heard he broke a man's arm yesterday during a meeting. Did Nixon get caught in it? For that kind of money, I'd endure it too. But only someone numb like him could survive this long. They don't know anything. They don't know that when Leander's control slips, when his body starts reacting like it's under attack, he doesn't reach for an Omega. He reaches for me. Because I'm the only one who doesn't trigger him. The only one his body accepts as safe. That morning, I escorted another Omega out of the compound. His name was Elias, a high-grade Omega from a powerful allied family. Pale skin, perfect posture, scent strong enough that even standing a few steps away, I could see the reaction it caused in the guards nearby. His hands were shaking as he wiped his eyes. "You expect me to stay in that room with him?" he snapped. "He's not human." I handed him a clean handkerchief. "Your car is ready. Compensation will be transferred according to the agreement." He let out a bitter laugh. "Of course a beta like you wouldn't understand. You can't even smell what he is." I adjusted my glasses and didn't respond. Because he was right about one thing. I can't smell pheromones. And that's exactly why I'm still alive. When I walked back into Leander's office, the place looked like a storm had passed through. A table overturned, documents scattered, one chair broken against the wall. Leander was sitting in the center of it all, shirt collar loose, tie hanging, breathing slow but heavy. His dark eyes lifted the second I entered. "He's gone." I nodded, stepping forward to pick up the papers. "He's gone. He called me a monster. That falls under defamation. We can respond if you want." He clicked his tongue, irritation flashing. "Nixon, do you have any emotion at all?" I stacked the documents neatly. "You have a meeting in 10 minutes. Your current state is not suitable." He stared at me for a second, then suddenly reached out and grabbed my wrist, pulling me closer. I leaned forward automatically, hands braced against the armrest of his chair. Our faces were inches apart. "Fix it," he said quietly. I exhaled and reached for his tie, adjusting it, smoothing the fabric, readying the knot with practiced movements. My fingers brushed his throat for half a second. That was enough. His entire body tensed, then he caught my hand and pressed it against his cheek. "Don't move." His eyes closed, the tight line between his brows easing just slightly. "Cold," he muttered. "Feels better." I glanced at my watch. 5 minutes. "Say one more word and I'll cut your pay." I shut up immediately. Money matters. Leander only let go right before the meeting started. Standing up, perfectly composed again like nothing had happened. "Tonight," he said, already walking toward the door. "You're coming with me." I paused. "Where?" "Main estate. Family gathering." My fingers tightened slightly around the file in my hand. That place wasn't a dinner. It was a battlefield filled with people who wanted him controlled, replaced, or dead. That's outside my contract. He didn't even look back. Triple pay. I turned instantly. Understood. That night, the estate was exactly as suffocating as I remembered. A long table filled with high-ranking family members, each one carrying the heavy presence of alpha or omega pheromones. Even without scent, I could feel it in the tension of the air. Leander sat near the head, expression cold, barely touching his drink. I stood behind him, silent, invisible, until his grandfather spoke. Leander, I've arranged something for you. The room went quiet. An omega. 99% compatibility. A perfect match. The kind of number that, in theory, could stabilize even an Enigma, or destroy him completely. My fingers tightened slightly behind my back. 99%. That meant if it worked, my role here would be over. No more late nights. No more being dragged out of bed. No more acting as a human stabilizer. I could leave. Finally leave. Go somewhere quiet. Live a normal life. It sounded perfect. I'm not interested, Leander said flatly. The old man's cane hit the floor with a sharp crack. You don't get to refuse. Silence stretched across the table. Then Leander leaned back slightly, his voice calm, but carrying something dangerous underneath. I'll bring my own partner to the next gathering. And for the first time that night, every single person at that table turned to look at me. Because in a world where enigmas are meant to belong to Omega's, Leander just chose a beta instead. The moment Leander said he would bring his own partner, the entire table went silent in a way that felt heavier than any threat. Dozens of eyes locked onto me at the same time. Some were confused, some amused, most of them filled with open contempt. To them, I was just Nixon, a scentless beta who stood behind the boss holding files and cleaning up messes. Not someone who belonged at the center of a decision like that. Not someone who could replace a 99% compatible Omega. Leander's grandfather didn't even bother hiding his disdain. A beta, he said slowly, like the word itself was an insult. You're telling me the heir of this family intends to rely on a scentless beta instead of a perfect match? Leander didn't look at him. He reached back, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me a step forward so I was no longer standing in the shadows. He's enough, he said, voice calm but absolute. More than enough. The grip on my wrist tightened just slightly, not painful, but firm enough to make a point. I didn't react. I kept my face neutral, the same way I always did, even though I could feel the entire room turning colder. We left before the argument could escalate further. The moment the car doors shut, cutting off the suffocating presence of the estate, Leander let go of my wrist and leaned back, closing his eyes. His breathing was controlled, but I could still see the faint tremor in his fingers. I rubbed the spot where he had been holding me and spoke in a steady tone. Boss, the Omega arranged by the family is still the most efficient solution. 99% compatibility is statistically optimal. His eyes snapped open instantly. Say that again, he said, voice low. I didn't hesitate. If your condition is stabilized, my role becomes unnecessary. That reduces long-term risk for the organization. There was a pause, then a short laugh that didn't sound amused at all. So you're trying to get rid of yourself, he asked. Or are you trying to hand me over to someone else? Before I could answer, he leaned forward and caught my tie, pulling me closer until my back hit the door. His presence pressed down on me, not through scent, but through sheer intensity. Nixon, he said quietly, did you forget what happened 5 years ago? I didn't forget. I never could. Back then, I wasn't his assistant. I was just an intern assigned to deliver documents to a high-level meeting. That day, Leander had just taken control of the organization, and half the room was trying to challenge him. The situation escalated fast. Voices rose. Someone made a move. And then his control broke. The pressure in the room turned suffocating in seconds. Alpha captains dropped to their knees, unable to resist the force pressing down on them. An Omega collapsed on the floor, body reacting violently. I remember walking in right through it. No resistance, no reaction. I didn't even realize something was wrong until I saw everyone else struggling. Leander looked at me like I didn't belong in that world. Like I was something completely out of place. I put the documents on the table and handed him a glass of water. Drink this, I said. You're losing control. For a second, I thought he would kill me. His eyes were red, filled with something close to violence. But instead, he took the glass. He drank. And slowly, the pressure eased. That was the first time he stabilized without suppressants. The second time was worse. It wasn't in a meeting room. It was after an ambush. Leander had been shot during a deal that went wrong. By the time I got there, he was already losing too much blood. The medics were delayed. There wasn't time. I didn't think much. I just gave the order to prep a transfusion and used my own blood. Same type. It worked. He survived. But something changed after that. At first, it was subtle. He started calling me more often, keeping me closer. Then it became impossible to ignore. His condition didn't respond to suppressants the same way anymore. But when I was around, he stayed stable. No violent spikes. No complete loss of control. It didn't follow any known pattern in abiodynamics. No pheromone exchange. No bonding marks. Just stabilization. The doctors couldn't explain it. I didn't try to. I just accepted the salary increase and the new terms of my job. You think an Omega can replace that? Leander's voice pulled me back to the present. His fingers slid up from my tie to the back of my neck, pressing lightly against the spot where scent glands would normally react. You think a number on a report means more than what my body already chose. My throat felt slightly dry, but my voice stayed level. Your body is reacting due to a past medical anomaly, not emotional attachment. He went still for a second, then smiled, slow and sharp. Then explain this, he said. Before I could react, he pulled me forward and pressed his forehead against mine, breath uneven for just a second. Why is it only you? I didn't answer. Because I didn't have one. By the time we got back to the main compound, things had already started moving. Caspian, one of the senior secretaries responsible for coordinating internal operations, was waiting by the entrance with a tablet in hand. He looked between us, clearly sensing the tension but smart enough not to comment. Boss, the Julian family has confirmed attendance at the Underground Gala next week, he reported. The Omega will be there. Leander didn't even pause. Cancel it. That might not be possible, Caspian said carefully. They've already spread word among the other families. I stepped in before Leander could respond. Then we adjust the plan, I said. We attend. Control the environment. Minimize variables. Leander glanced at me, something unreadable in his expression. You're coming, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Understood. Later that night, I thought about leaving again. I even opened my banking app and calculated how much I had saved over the past 5 years. Enough to disappear. Enough to start over somewhere no one knew my name. No enigmas. No pheromone disorders. No midnight calls. Just a quiet life. It made sense. It was logical. And yet, when I closed my eyes, I could still remember the way Leander looked at me earlier. Not angry. Not cold. Something else. Something closer to need. I exhaled and locked my phone. For now, I stayed. Because whether I liked it or not, there was one fact I couldn't ignore anymore. Leander's condition wasn't just something I managed. It was something tied to me. And if I walked away too early, there was a real chance he wouldn't just lose control. He might not survive it. Because if Nixon leaves, the question isn't whether Leander will go insane. It's whether anyone will survive when he does. By the time the Underground Gala approached, the entire city already knew something was about to happen. Not officially, of course. Nothing in our world was ever announced out loud. But the flow of information changed. Alliances shifted slightly. Security tightened. And most importantly, the name Julian started appearing in conversations more often than usual. The Julian family was old money, deeply rooted in both legal and underground networks, and the Omega they were sending was rumored to be their most valuable asset. S-Class, perfectly trained, and carrying a 99% compatibility rate with Leander. In any normal situation, that number alone would have settled everything. It meant stability, control, and a clean solution to a dangerous problem. But Leander was not a normal case, and nothing about this situation felt clean. Caspian handed me the final event briefing in the car. The venue is secured, he said, keeping his voice steady, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. All major families will be present. The Julian Omega will arrive 10 minutes after the boss to maximize attention. I skimmed through the document quickly, checking the layout, exits, and assigned positions. Increase the number of beta guards on the inner perimeter, I said. No Omegas within 5 meters of the boss unless cleared. Caspian blinked. That might offend them. I closed the file. Offense is better than a body count. He nodded immediately and started updating the plan. Leander didn't say anything during the entire ride. He sat back in the seat, eyes half-lidded, one hand resting loosely against his thigh. On the surface, he looked calm, controlled, exactly like the mafia boss everyone feared. But I knew better. The stillness wasn't calm. It was restraint. His condition had been unstable since the dinner at the estate. Not enough to lose control, but enough that I could see the signs. The slight delay in his breathing. The way his fingers occasionally curled like he was holding something back. When the car finally stopped, I reached for the door, but his hand shot out and caught my wrist before I could move. "Stay close," he said quietly. I nodded once. "Always." The moment we stepped into the venue, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't visible, not in a way most people could describe, but it was there. Power layered on top of power. Pheromones pressing against each other in an invisible war. Alphas asserting dominance, Omegas maintaining control. Each group trying to claim space without triggering open conflict. I walked half a step behind Leander, matching his pace exactly, my eyes scanning the room while my mind mapped every possible threat. Conversations paused as we passed. Some people lowered their heads slightly. Others watched openly, curiosity mixed with calculation. No one approached. Not yet. We hadn't even reached the center of the hall when the shift happened. It started small. A ripple. A change in posture from the people closest to the entrance. Then the space parted slightly, and I saw him. The Julian Omega. His name was Kale, the youngest son of the Julian family, introduced as a diplomatic asset, but clearly much more than that. He looked exactly like the rumors described. Pale skin, controlled expression, eyes that carried just enough softness to lower defenses without appearing weak. He moved with precision, each step measured, each glance calculated. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was harmless. But nothing in this world was harmless, especially not something designed to control an enigma. He stopped a few steps away from us and bowed his head slightly. "Boss Leander," he said, voice smooth, perfectly trained. "It's an honor." Leander didn't respond immediately. His gaze stayed fixed on Kale, expression unreadable. I shifted slightly, positioning myself just enough to intercept if needed. Kale's eyes flicked to me for a fraction of a second, and I saw it. Recognition. Not of who I was, but of what I represented. An anomaly. Then he smiled faintly and stepped closer. "I've heard a lot about your condition," he continued. "I believe I can help." That was when the air changed again. At first, I thought it was just the tension building. But then I noticed the reactions. A nearby alpha straightened abruptly, his breathing turning uneven. Another man took a step back, eyes narrowing as if trying to focus. One of the servers, an Omega, froze in place, fingers tightening around the tray he was holding. Something was spreading. Fast. I turned my head slightly, watching Kale more carefully now. His expression hadn't changed, but there was something different in the way he held himself. Too relaxed. Too confident. "Boss," I said quietly, not looking away from Kale. "We should move." Leander didn't move. Kale took one more step forward. That was the trigger. The reaction hit the room like a wave. Not visible, but undeniable. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A glass shattered somewhere behind us. The Omega server dropped to his knees, body shaking uncontrollably. An alpha cursed under his breath, grabbing the edge of a table as if the ground had shifted beneath him. Induced heat. Deliberate. Controlled. And aimed directly at Leander. "Get back," I said sharply, stepping in front of him without thinking. My body moved before my mind caught up. I could feel the shift behind me instantly. The temperature changed. The pressure increased. Leander's control snapped. Not completely, not yet, but enough. His breathing turned heavy, uneven. I didn't need to turn around to know what his eyes looked like. I had seen it before. The edge of losing control. The point where instinct overrides everything else. Kale's expression faltered for the first time, just for a second, as if he hadn't expected the reaction to go this way. "Stop," I said, voice low but firm, directing it at both of them. "This isn't containment. This is escalation." Kale's smile disappeared completely. "You don't understand," he said, tone tightening. "This is how it works. He needs this." "No," I said immediately. "He doesn't." Behind me, Leander moved. One step forward, then another, like he was being pulled by something he couldn't fight. I turned, catching his arm before he could close the distance completely. His skin was burning hot under my hand. His muscles were tense, like they were fighting against themselves. "Look at me," I said. He didn't respond. Cale reached out. That was his mistake. The moment his hand came within reach, Leander reacted. Not like someone drawn in, like someone under attack. He grabbed Cale's wrist mid-motion and shoved him back hard enough that the Omega stumbled, nearly losing his balance. The room erupted instantly. Voices rising, guards moving, the fragile control of the event collapsing in seconds. I stepped forward, blocking Leander's line of sight again, forcing him to focus. "Boss," I said, sharper this time. "Focus on me." His head snapped toward me, and for a split second, everything else disappeared. The noise, the pressure, the chaos. It all faded into the background. His hand shot out, gripping my arm tight. Not to push me away, to hold on. Leander's grip tightened around my arm like I was the only solid thing left in a collapsing world. His breathing was rough, uneven, and I could feel the heat radiating off his skin even through the fabric of my suit. Around us, the entire hall was falling apart. Voices were rising, guards pushing through the crowd, Alphas trying to regain control while Omegas either fled or collapsed under the pressure. But none of that mattered right now. If Leander lost control completely in a place like this, it wouldn't just be chaos. It would be a massacre. "Move," I said quietly, turning my body to block his view of Cale entirely. "We're leaving." He didn't argue. That alone told me how bad it was. Normally, Leander would never back down in front of an audience, never show weakness. But right now, he let me guide him, step by step, out of the main hall. His hand never left me. If anything, his grip only grew tighter, like he was afraid I would disappear if he loosened it for even a second. We barely made it to the private corridor before his control slipped further. His steps faltered once, then again, until his entire weight pressed forward into me. I caught him by the shoulders, steadying both of us against the wall. "Stay with me," I said, keeping my voice level even as my heart rate started to climb. His head dropped slightly, forehead brushing against my shoulder, breath hot and uneven against my neck. "Nixon," my name came out low, strained, like it was being forced past something he couldn't control. "I'm here," I answered immediately. "Just focus on that. Nothing else." His fingers dug into the fabric at my back, holding on hard enough to wrinkle the suit. Behind us, I could hear footsteps approaching, security most likely, but I didn't turn around. "No one comes in," I said sharply over my shoulder. "Seal this floor. Anyone who tries to get through gets stopped." There was a brief hesitation, then a quick response from one of the guards. "Understood." The footsteps retreated. The moment the corridor cleared, Leander moved again. Not away from me, but closer. He pushed forward, backing me against the wall, one hand braced beside my head while the other stayed locked around my waist. His control was hanging by a thread. His eyes were no longer focused in the way they usually were. Dark, sharp, calculating. Now they were unfocused, burning, locked on me like I was the only thing he could see. "Don't move," he said, voice rough. It wasn't an order. It was a warning. "I'm not going anywhere," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "But you need to get a hold of yourself." He let out a short, broken laugh that didn't sound like amusement at all. "You think I'm not trying?" His hand slid up from my waist to my shoulder, fingers tightening, then loosening, like he was struggling to regulate his own strength. "That Omega," he muttered, jaw clenching. "That wasn't help. That was poison." "I know," I said, "which is why you need to ignore it." He shook his head once, sharp, frustrated. "I can't ignore it," he snapped. "It's everywhere." His breathing hitched, and for a moment, his entire body tensed like it was about to snap again. Instinctively, I reached up and placed my hand against the side of his neck, right where the tension was strongest. His reaction was immediate. He froze. For a second, everything went completely still. His breathing slowed just a fraction. The tightness in his shoulders eased, barely noticeable but there. His eyes, still dark and unstable, flickered slightly, like something was pulling him back. "Focus," I said again, quieter this time. "On me." He stared at me like he was trying to anchor himself, like my face was the only reference point left in a distorted world. "Only you," he said under his breath, almost like he was convincing himself. "Only you works." Before I could respond, his grip tightened again, and he pulled me closer, closing the last bit of distance between us. His forehead pressed against mine, breath still uneven but no longer completely out of control. "You don't understand," he said, voice lower now, less sharp, more strained. "It's not just the reaction. He stopped, jaw tightening as if he couldn't find the words. "Everything else disappears when you're here." That was the moment I realized how far this had gone. This wasn't just about stabilizing his condition anymore. This wasn't just a biological anomaly from a transfusion years ago. This was something deeper. Something his body had already accepted as fact. "You're overreacting," I said automatically, falling back on logic because it was the only thing I trusted. "Your system is under stress. Once it stabilizes, this will pass." His expression changed instantly. Not calmer, not reassured. Something sharper, more focused. "You still think this is temporary?" he asked. "You still think I can replace you with someone else?" I didn't answer. Because I couldn't. He leaned in slightly, voice dropping even lower. "Look at what just happened," he continued. 99% compatibility. The highest match possible. And what did it do? His hand tightened against my waist again. It made me lose control. Not stabilize. Not balance. It pushed me over the edge. His gaze locked onto mine, intense and unyielding. "And you," he exhaled slowly, like he was trying to steady himself through the act alone. "You bring me back." For a second, neither of us moved. The chaos outside the corridor felt distant now, like it belonged to another space entirely. All I could hear was his breathing, still uneven but gradually stabilizing, and my own slower but not entirely steady. "Boss," I started, trying to redirect the situation back into something manageable. "We need to get you to a controlled environment. This isn't safe." He didn't let go. "You're the controlled environment," he said immediately. No hesitation. No doubt. That answer should have been dismissed. Filed away as another symptom, another sign of his condition reacting under pressure. But the way he said it, calm, certain, grounded, made it harder than it should have been to ignore. "Nixon," he said again, quieter now, almost steady. "Stay." I didn't move. Because at this point, leaving wasn't just unprofessional. It was dangerous. For both of us. We didn't go back to the main hall. There was no point. By the time Leander's breathing stabilized enough for him to stand without leaning on me, the gala was already beyond repair. Too many witnesses, too much chaos, and most importantly, too many people had seen something they weren't supposed to understand. An Enigma rejecting a 99% compatible Omega wasn't just unusual. It was a problem. For the families. For the power balance. For anyone who believed pheromones defined hierarchy. I adjusted my cuff slightly, checking my watch out of habit. "The event is compromised," I said, voice back to its usual neutral tone. "We should leave before anyone attempts to escalate further." Leander didn't respond immediately. His hand was still resting at my waist, not gripping as tightly as before, but not letting go either. His eyes were clearer now, the earlier haze gone, replaced by something sharper. Focused. Intentional. "You're still thinking about logistics?" he asked. "You always do this." "That's my job," I replied. "Your survival depends on it." He let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and frustration. "No," he said. "My survival depends on you." I didn't answer that. Instead, I reached up and removed his hand from my waist, step by step, like I was disengaging something volatile rather than simply moving a person. "We're leaving," I repeated. This time, he didn't resist. The ride back was silent. Not the calm kind. The kind where something had shifted and neither side was willing to acknowledge it first. I reviewed the incident in my head, breaking it down into facts. Induced heat. Targeted. Not accidental. That meant the Julian family didn't intend to help Leander. They intended to control him. Or break him. Either outcome benefited them. I made a mental note to prepare a counter-response. Contracts, alliances, retaliation. All of it could be handled. That was the easy part. The hard part was sitting right next to me. Leander hadn't looked away from me since we got into the car. Not openly staring, but enough that I could feel it without turning my head. Like he was confirming something over and over again. Something he wasn't willing to say yet. When we reached the compound, I stepped out first, giving the usual instructions to the security team. No one enters the boss's floor without clearance. Increase perimeter watch. Any movement from the Julian side gets reported immediately. The guards nodded, quick and precise. By the time I turned back, Leander was already walking ahead, not toward his office, but toward the private elevator that led to the upper residence. That wasn't part of the plan. "Boss," I called, falling into step beside him. "You still have. Cancel everything," he said without looking at me. "Tonight. Tomorrow. Everything. That will disrupt." I said cancel it. His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. I stopped talking immediately. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. The space was quiet, enclosed, and the distance between us was barely half a step. I could feel the heat coming off him again, not as intense as before, but still there, like something under the surface hadn't settled completely. When the doors opened, he walked straight into the penthouse and didn't stop until we reached the center of the room. Then he turned. "Explain it," he said. I paused. "Explain what?" "Everything," he replied. "What happened tonight? What's been happening for the past 5 years? Why none of it follows any rule I know?" I exhaled slowly. This was not a conversation I wanted to have. Not because I didn't have answers, but because the answers weren't clean. "Your condition is classified as Enigma instability," I began. "Your system reacts abnormally to pheromone input. High compatibility increases neural load instead of balancing it. That's why the omega triggered a spike instead of stabilizing you." "And you?" he asked immediately. "That's different," I said. "I don't produce pheromones. There's nothing for your system to react to." "That's not an explanation," he said. "That's avoidance." I didn't respond right away. Because he wasn't wrong. "There's a secondary factor," I said finally. "The transfusion." His expression didn't change, but I could tell he was listening more closely now. "Your body underwent severe trauma at the time," I continued. "In rare Enigma cases that can trigger adaptive responses. Neural imprinting. Your system may have recalibrated. Using my biological markers as a reference point. Say it in a way that doesn't sound like a report," he said. I looked at him directly. "Your body got used to me," I said. "And now it doesn't accept anything else." Silence. For a moment, I thought that would be enough. A clear explanation. Logical. Contained. Something he could process and move past. I miscalculated. "Used to you," he repeated, voice low. Then he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's what you think this is?" He took a step forward. Then another. I didn't move. "You think this is just adaptation?" he continued. "A side effect of a medical incident?" His hand came up again, this time not stopping at my shoulder, but sliding up to the side of my neck, fingers pressing lightly where my pulse was strongest. My body didn't react. It never did. That was the problem. "You're wrong," he said quietly. His grip tightened just slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to keep me in place. "If it was just adaptation, I could replace it," he continued. "If it was just biology, something else would work eventually." His thumb shifted, brushing once against my skin, slow and deliberate. "But nothing else works." I held his gaze. "That doesn't make it anything more." "It makes it everything," he said. The air between us shifted again, but not in the same way as before. Not chaotic. Not unstable. Something more focused. Intentional. Controlled. "You're still thinking about leaving," he said suddenly. I didn't answer. "You calculated it already, didn't you?" he continued. "Savings. Exit plan. How long before you disappear and never come back?" That made me pause. He noticed. "Say it," he said. "I'm considering it," I replied. His expression didn't change immediately. That was the dangerous part. The stillness. The moment before a reaction. "And you think I'll let you?" he asked. "That's not your decision," I said. "It is if you belong to me," he replied. "I don't." His eyes narrowed slightly. Then, without warning, he closed the distance completely and pulled me in, his hand tightening at the back of my neck, forcing my head to tilt just enough that I couldn't look away. "You do," he said quietly. "Maybe not on paper. Maybe not by contract." His voice dropped lower. "But my body already decided that 5 years ago." My breath stayed steady, but my chest felt tighter than it should have. "This isn't a job anymore, Nixon," he continued. "You don't get to walk away from something like this." "And what is this?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned closer, his forehead pressing against mine again, the same way it had in the corridor, but this time without the instability. Without the chaos. Just control. "Dependence," he said. That word should have made things clearer. Instead, it made everything worse. Because if this was dependence, then leaving wouldn't just be inconvenient. It would be dangerous. For him. And maybe for me too. The call came at 6 in the morning, and it wasn't from the compound. It was from a number I hadn't answered in years. I picked up anyway. A familiar voice broke down on the other end before she could even finish a sentence. It was Aunt Mira, one of the caretakers from the orphanage I grew up in. She was crying, words tumbling over each other, saying the director had fallen down the stairs in the middle of the night and was now in critical condition. Surgery was needed urgently, but the funds weren't there yet. I didn't think. I didn't check the schedule. I didn't ask permission. I just got up, changed, and sent one message before leaving. Emergency. Taking leave. Keep your phone on. Then I hesitated for a second and added another line. There's food in the kitchen. Heat it before eating. I locked my phone and walked out. That was my mistake. The hospital was across the city. By the time I arrived, the situation had already stabilized enough for them to move the director into surgery, but the cost estimate on the desk was enough to make anyone hesitate. I didn't. I handed over my card and told them to proceed immediately. Aunt Mira looked at me like she didn't recognize the person I had become. I didn't explain. There was nothing to explain. Money solves problems. That's all that mattered. I didn't check my phone for the next hour. When I finally did, the screen lit up with notifications. Missed calls. Messages. All from one person. Leander. The first message was short. Where are you? The second one came 2 minutes later. Answer. Then another. Nixon. Then again. Pick up the phone. The last message had a photo attached. It was my contract. The original one. The edge of it was held up to a lighter flame. If you don't answer, the message read, I burn it. I called back immediately. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. That's when another call came in. Caspin. His voice was nothing like usual. Normally calm, controlled, always thinking 2 steps ahead. This time he was panicking. Where are you? He asked the second I picked up. The boss, he lost control. The meeting room is destroyed. 2 captains are injured. Security can't get close. He keeps calling your name. My grip on the phone tightened. Who's inside? I asked. 12 people, Caspian said quickly. 7 already got out. The rest are trapped. There's an Omega intern in there too. That was enough. Get every Omega out immediately, I said. Open every door and window. Increase ventilation. Don't try to restrain him directly. We can't get close. Then don't. I cut him off. Put the phone on speaker and leave it by the door. There was a pause, then movement. I could hear shouting in the background. Something breaking. Heavy. Repeated. Then I heard it. Nixon. My name, shouted like a command and a plea at the same time. I checked the distance. Still too far. Keep the line open, I said, already moving toward the exit. I'll be there. Traffic was a wall. Cars packed tight, barely moving. Waiting wasn't an option. I threw cash at the driver, pushed the door open, and started running. By the time I reached the compound, my shirt was soaked, my breathing uneven, but I didn't slow down. The guards at the entrance didn't stop me. They didn't need to. Everyone knew. Something had gone wrong. The elevator ride felt longer than any mission I had ever been on. When the doors opened, the entire floor was silent except for the noise coming from the conference room at the end of the hall. Broken glass. Furniture hitting the ground. Someone shouting. Then silence. Then another crash. Caspian was standing outside, pale, holding onto a stack of documents like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. He saw me and almost sagged in relief. He's still inside, he said. No one can get near him. I didn't respond. I just walked forward and pushed the door open. The room looked like it had been hit by an explosion. The long table was split down the middle. Chairs overturned. Blood on the floor. 2 men pressed against the wall, not moving, either unconscious or too afraid to try. And in the center of it all, Leander. He was standing with his back slightly hunched, one hand braced against the edge of the broken table. His shirt was half torn, sleeves rolled unevenly, hair disheveled, breathing heavy. His entire body was tense, like something inside him was trying to break out. Then he saw me. Everything stopped. The moment his eyes locked onto mine, the tension in the room shifted instantly. Not gone. Not fully controlled. But redirected. He took 1 step forward. Then another. Glass crunched under his shoes, but he didn't slow down. I stepped in to meet him. The impact nearly knocked me back. He grabbed onto me with both arms, pulling me in hard, like he needed to confirm I was real. His head dropped against my shoulder, breath hot and uneven against my neck. "Where did you go?" he asked, voice rough, almost unrecognizable. "I'm here," I said, placing one hand at the back of his head, steadying him. "It's fine." Behind me, I could feel the presence of the others still watching, frozen in place. "Have you seen enough?" I said without turning around. No one moved. "Leave." That was enough. Footsteps scrambled out of the room. The door shut. Silence. Leander didn't let go. His grip tightened instead. "You said you'd be here," he muttered against my shoulder. "I am." "You didn't answer." "My phone died." "You left." That wasn't a question. I didn't answer. Because for the first time since I started working for him, I wasn't sure if leaving was something I could still do. He lifted his head slightly, just enough to look at me. His eyes were still unstable. But this time there was something else mixed in. Not just loss of control. Fear. And that was far more dangerous than anything else in this room. By the time Leander finally let go of me, the worst of it had passed. His breathing had slowed, his grip loosened just enough that I could step back without having to pry his hands off. The room was still a disaster, but the danger was gone. At least for now. I adjusted my sleeve, straightened what was left of my shirt, and glanced at the broken table. "We'll need a new one," I said out of habit. It was a pointless comment, but it grounded the moment. Put things back into something manageable. Controlled. Leander didn't respond. He was still looking at me, like he was trying to confirm I was actually there and not something his mind had made up. I picked up a piece of glass near my foot and tossed it aside. "You injured 2 captains," I added. "We'll have to compensate their families." Still nothing. I exhaled quietly. "Boss, if you're done destroying the room, we need to move." That finally got a reaction. "Don't call me that right now," he said. His voice wasn't sharp like before. It was lower. Controlled, but barely. I paused, then nodded once. "Fine." I stepped closer again, lowering my voice slightly. "Then calm down. You're stable now." "I wasn't," he said immediately. "Not until you came back." "I told you," I replied. "Your system reacts under stress." "That's all." "That's not all," he said. There was a silence that followed, heavier than before. Not the kind filled with chaos. The kind filled with something unspoken. Before I could respond, there was a knock on the door. Not loud. Controlled. Someone who knew better than to interrupt, but didn't have a choice. "Enter," I said. The door opened just enough for Caspian to step in. He looked worse than before. Still pale, but now with that careful, professional expression he used when trying not to panic. "Sir," he said, glancing quickly between us before focusing on Leander. "The chairman has arrived." That explained it. Leander didn't turn around. "Where?" "Reception room on this floor," Caspian replied. "He brought people." Of course he did. I picked up my glasses from the edge of the table, wiped them quickly, and put them back on. "Clean this up," I told Caspian. "No one else comes up." He nodded immediately and stepped out. "Let's go," I said, turning to Leander. This time he followed. The reception room was quiet when we entered. Too quiet. Leander's grandfather was already there, seated in a wheelchair, hands resting on the handle of his cane. Age had taken his mobility, but not his presence. His eyes were sharp, calculating, the kind that had built an empire long before Leander took over. 2 bodyguards stood behind him, both alphas, both silent. His gaze didn't even pause on me at first. "Is this what you call control?" he asked, voice calm but heavy. "Destroying your own territory in broad daylight?" Leander didn't respond. "Breaking an alliance with the Julian family," the old man continued. "Refusing a 99% match. And now this." His eyes finally shifted, landing on me. Slow. Deliberate. All for a beta. I stepped forward before Leander could speak. "Chairman," I said, keeping my tone respectful but steady. "This is not about preference. It's about outcome." He looked at me like I had said something mildly interesting. "Explain." I opened the tablet I had taken from Caspian earlier and placed it on the table in front of him. "These are the boss's biometric records over the past 5 years," I said. "Hormone levels, neural activity, incident frequency." I tapped the screen once, bringing up the comparison graph. Before and after consistent exposure to me. He didn't interrupt. Without Omega intervention, I continued, his condition stabilized progressively. Incident rates dropped. Control improved. However, I switched the data set. When exposed to high-compatibility Omega pheromones, especially during the recent gala, his neural load spiked beyond safe thresholds. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. In simple terms, I said, meeting his gaze directly, the Omega doesn't stabilize him. It destabilizes him. Silence filled the room. Leander's hand moved slightly at my back, not stopping me, but not entirely still either. And you? The old man asked. I stabilize him, I said. No hesitation. No emotion. Just fact. That's convenient, he replied. It's measurable, I corrected. Another pause. Then he let out a short, quiet breath, like he was weighing something. Name your price, he said. There it was. I had expected it. Money. Power. Position. That was how problems were solved in this world. I pushed my glasses up slightly. I'm not for sale, I said. That got a reaction. Not from him. From Leander. A small one. Subtle. But there. Then what do you want? The old man asked. I glanced at Leander for half a second before answering. Operational authority, I said. Full access to decision-making regarding his condition. No interference from external parties. You're asking to control him, he said. I'm asking to keep him alive, I replied. The room went quiet again. This time longer. Then, slowly, the old man leaned back in his chair. Interesting, he said. He didn't agree. But he didn't refuse either. That was enough. Next week, he said, turning his chair slightly, already signaling the end of the conversation. You will attend the family gathering again. Leander finally spoke. We will. Not I. We. The old man didn't comment on that. He just waved a hand once, and his guards moved immediately, pushing the wheelchair out of the room. The door closed. Silence returned. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then Leander stepped closer. Not aggressively. Not like before. Just close enough. You didn't take the deal, he said. I don't need it, I replied. You could have left, he added. I still can. That made him pause. Then he let out a quiet breath, something that sounded almost like a laugh, but softer. You won't, he said. I didn't answer immediately. Because for the first time, I wasn't calculating salary, contracts, or exit plans. I was thinking about something else entirely. No, I said finally. I won't. His hand came up slower this time, resting lightly at the back of my neck. Not holding. Not forcing. Just there. Then stay, he said. This time, it wasn't a command. And for once, I didn't treat it like one. And that's where this story settles, for now. Not with a contract, not with a deal, but with a choice. One Enigma who could control the entire underworld, and one Beta who chose to stay anyway. If this twisted bond between power and dependence pulled you in, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Tell me in the comments, was it control, obsession, or something deeper that kept Nixon from walking away? Until next time, stay curious, and never underestimate the one person a monster can't live without.